Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 4 of Agent Carter called The Blitzkrieg Button. Now I know this review is going to go up well after the episode aired. I've moved recently. I still haven't gotten internet up in my apartment, so I've finally had enough time and energy to sit down and start getting caught up on my recordings. So episode 5 will have aired after before this review goes up, but as of this recording I have not seen it yet, so please just keep that in mind. So anyway, I thought this was again another pretty strong episode, and what I've noticed here is that each episode, while it's kind of juggled everybody, has kind of more or less in a lot of ways focused in on one particular kind of person. So for example, obviously the first episode is really mostly going to be about Peggy. The second episode really focused in on Jarvis. The third episode, they really kind of took the time to flesh out the guys at the agency. And this episode, they sort of bring it around to the other really big player in this story, which is, of course, Howard Stark. So here we get to see Howard. This is really the most time we've spent with him as a character since the original Captain America movie. We get a lot of nice insight into his character, who he is. We really do see that he really is Tony Stark's dad. He's basically like Tony in really every way. He's that ladies' man, insufferable genius womanizer, but also a guy with a decent heart inside of him, and some real moments of capable of really incredible moments of sincerity with the handful of people that he really connects with. And this, of course, makes the fact that ultimately, hang on, let's back up a moment. Now, I said one of the things that reasons that in the first episode that Peggy was so willing to do this stuff and trying to clear Howard's name is that he's basically the only person out there who, other than Steve Rogers, who as far as she's concerned is dead, who really understands what she's capable of, believes in her, and respects her. So this is why Howard lying to her about what that thing that he wanted back from the laboratory was really stung. She had put so much of her faith in Howard and trust in Howard because Howard had trusted her, had faith in her. And to have him deceive her and then to find out that this thing that he's got just trying to use her to get was a sample of Steve Rogers' blood, the blood of the man that she loved, well, there's no way that she can't look at that and not feel a little bit betrayed. And she even really gets on Howard's case about this, and he's like, "Look, I know I deceived you. I know you're angry at me, and I deserve this. But what we can do with a sample of Captain America's blood could save millions of lives, cure diseases, and all this other stuff." And remember, this is 1946. Smallpox was still a thing. That wasn't eradicated until 1979. People, millions of them, all around the world were being crippled by polio, which is still around, but only in, frankly, the really badly developed parts of the world. And just to kind of give you an idea of how big of a deal this is, when they created the polio vaccine in the 1950s, everybody got this. I mean, my grandfather, he still had this little scar on his arm from when, as a kid, he was given the polio vaccine. So, and I don't really think that even for a moment Howard was really concerned about padding his bank account. I mean, sure, he's Howard Stark. He probably would have found a way to make some profit off of this. But, profiting off the suffering of others, that's kind of a questionable thing. But you really do get the impression here that maybe Howard would have found a way to make some money of it, but that really was not one on his mind. He really genuinely wanted to use what was left of Steve Rogers to do the sort of thing that Steve would have wanted to make the Project Rebirth, the Captain America program, something that could benefit everyone. And if he had to deceive Peggy in order to do that, well, there's the rub, huh? And what's really interesting is then when you put Howard on this one side, the person who believes in Peggy and understands what she's capable of, and is really her friend and ally, and he lies to her. And then you've got her co-worker guy who I think understands that Peggy is maybe capable of a little bit more than what they've seen from her so far. But he's the one that goes out there and he gives her that speech and basically says like, look, it doesn't really matter what skills and talent you are. At the end of the day, you're a woman, so there's only so far that you're ever going to be able to go. And while he's being a big, by our standards, jerk, from his perspective and from the perspective of the society in which he and Peggy live, all he's doing is telling her the truth. He's basically being honest with her. And he's doing it in a really dickish way, and that does Peggy no real favors, but again, he's just sort of laying the truth out for her. And as harsh as it may seem, here's this person who basically is kind of an antagonist towards Peggy, but at least they're being honest with her. Her ally, her friend Howard, is not being honest with her, and that's where the real knife in the gut is. And let's see what else. We get a little bit more time with the manager lady, and again, she's I think just really there to very much represent the lockstep, the accepted role of women in society in that time, and just as importantly, the women of that time who accepted the reality in which they were in as the proper way. And there's always going to be that conflict between the people who think that things are fine as they are, and then there are the people who think that no, things need to change. And the show is doing a nice way of presenting that contrast. She isn't really presented as an evil person, just someone who is a traditionalist, I suppose is one way to put it. Of course, we can't forget to acknowledge that, hey, cameo by Stan Lee. It's always nice to see him. Let me see what else we have. Yes, we also got to see Dottie, the new neighbor of Peggy, going out there and killing a bad guy in a very Black Widow-esque sort of way. Now, if you're familiar with the comics, I'll spare you a lot of complicated comic book history, but the program that created Black Widow was called the Red Room. And it's sort of all been implied, as they revised the history of the characters, because, you can't keep things exactly as they were in the 1960s. Like, for example, Professor Xavier was originally presented as having fought in the Korean War. Well, unless you want Professor Xavier to be like 90 years old, over the years things like that evolved and changed. So it isn't exactly 100% clear how long the Red Room has been cranking out women like Natasha Romanoff, and frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what's been going on with Dottie here, that she's basically sort of a precursor to Black Widow. Because, one, that would be really cool, and two, wouldn't it be interesting for Peggy to run up against somebody who's on par with Black Widow, who's on the opposite side, but is also basically the only person in this really crazy, messed up world that she lives in who could possibly really, really, truly understand what it is she's going through. And then, of course, having that person be an enemy or an antagonist. Well, again, that's one more knife to the gut for poor Peggy. Now, again, I'm just sort of spitballing here, but we've sort of been seeing Russian agents presented as the major antagonists, since Hydra is kind of off the board for the moment. And of course that makes perfect sense. Russia was, of course, gearing up to sort of really be that big antagonist towards the United States for the next several decades. Leviathan is indeed basically the Russian version of Hydra in the comics. So again, it all just really, really just makes sense on a lot of levels that Dottie is going to turn out to be some sort of prototype precursor to Black Widow. And yeah, that's really all I kind of have to say about this episode. Again, another good, solid episode. Quite a lot of fun to watch. It doesn't seem like it, but we're actually halfway through the season at this point. So, full steam ahead. I have complete faith this show is going to deliver some more cool stuff as we go along. So, guys, until then, until next time, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. And until then, take care and have a good one.